We are back on the Gstaad Guy podcast with my dear friend Nadine Ghosn. And Nadine Ghosn is the founder of Nadine Ghosn Fine Jewelry. You may know her work as the famous burger ring, the Crayola bracelet, the pencil bracelet, and many more. Nadine started her career in a very different way, studying psychology and arts and
Definitely
economics.
not psychology, but I think that's my mission
now. It was
now.
economics and arts at Stanford. Okay. Then working at BCG Consulting, and then joining Hermes, and ultimately leaving Hermes to pursue your own path. And we now find ourselves on a similar travel circuit for both of our careers, which started off quite different until I started to also make jewelry. And we've, in the past couple of months, been in LA together, Shanghai, St. Moritz, and
that's true.
Places in between.
People confuse us for dating, but we're actually invited to very similar events.
They do. It's good PR for me. We're not dating. We're just friends.
Oh, we'll get into that. We'll get into that in this podcast.
Please.
Okay.
Around the world with your host, the Gstaad Guy. We welcome you back to the Gstaad Guy podcast, sharing stories of excellence with those in the know for those who just know.
So it's so great to have you here today.
Well, thanks for having me. It's lovely to be here. I love your house. Is this your house in LA?
This is not my house. This is a house that a friend is very kindly letting me film in. His name is Max Nobel, and he runs an amazing real estate development business and interior design business called Nobel. They build these amazing homes, and this is one of them.
So it's not your house yet?
Not my house yet. Hopefully after this podcast, people buy a lot of Poubelle, and I don't know. Who knows what could happen. Yeah.
You never know.
You never know.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm here and open to questions and to sharing a bit of my story.
Great.
So feel free to quiz me.
Please.
This is my first, I would say, interview or podcast. So bear with me.
Great. We're all bearing. I would love to know why jewelry, and why did you leave your job to do what you do today and what you're in many ways famous for today?
So jewelry has always been what I've been very passionate about. So you look at pictures of me when I was 3 years old and I was decked out in jewelry. I have 3 siblings, and it's funny because each one of us were passionate about different things. One of my sister, who's a huge nerd, asked for books, and I was asking for jewelry, and my sister was asking for dolls. And so you see these pictures of me at 3, and I have 3 necklaces on, 5 rings, earrings on. It was always kind of where my interest flowed, but my career track was very different. I was born into a family where my dad's an engineer, and so for him, career and education is very key. And I followed that path for a very long time until at one point I realized that path wasn't working for me. So I went to Stanford and double majored, and at the time I was the only person who was doing economics and art, which was considered very weird, and I didn't really understand, but I had this pull towards both. And then I went into consulting for 2 years, and it just really wasn't for me. And after that, I had the opportunity of working with Hermes, which is very strong, I would say, creative company. That's, to me, one of the highest luxury brands, where I learned quite a bit while I was there. And I was also challenged because it was a new cultural realm. Going from California to Paris and being in a different culture influenced me. But then at the time that we were defining my career's next steps, I was turning 25. I think we weren't aligned from a cultural hierarchical perspective. I was coming from a school where people were building companies and didn't matter what your age was. It was more about your capabilities. And in France, it's a little more old school, and you take your time, you stay somewhere for 10 years, et cetera, et cetera. So I was just at a different pace. And at that time, I was like, you know what? I want to learn something tangible. I've done a lot of consulting work, but I haven't gone into the nitty gritty. And I read a lot of books, and I've read a lot of self-help books at the time. And one book was talking about finding your flow. What is something you do where you lose yourself completely? And for me, it was just going into my jewelry box and purchasing jewelry. And so there was definitely an attraction there that I decided to explore. And I was very lucky because I started at a time where social media, Instagram was like building momentum. And
You've been doing this for 10 years, right?
I've now been doing this for 10 years. So you can do the math. 25, now I'm 35 years old. And I have to say, I like built out a career that I'm absolutely in love with. I'm like never bored. I'm meeting great people. The challenge I faced when I was in consulting, I was like, I really don't admire the people who are above me. I don't aspire to their lifestyle, their family, like everything was imbalanced. It wasn't like my version of success. And so I'm building my own version of success. And what that looks like to me.
Yeah, I love that you talk about that experience of opening the jewelry box and feeling that excitement. I think most people align with that. But I had a similar feeling, not so much with a jewelry box, but when I started Poubelle, I was having dinner with a friend of mine, actually a mutual friend, Alex Icon. And he was telling me, why do you run Palais Constance, the rosé brand that I started? And that's because I think it's a great business. He said, well, I think it's about time, because he knows I don't even drink.
Yeah.
But he said, I think it's about time you work on something that you love. And the only thing I see that's consistent about the way you dress and the way you are is these bracelets you wear. And I was wearing all these random bracelets from travels around the world, often just like €1 from these destinations. And I felt that was my way of always having a piece attached to me of expressing who I am.
And
if I wore a suit or a tuxedo or whatever it was, exactly my experience and who I am. And I feel like in a similar but different way, your jewelry does the same about you, because you're someone who I've seen navigate so many different rooms, in some very serious rooms with very serious conversations, and some where we're just clowning in the corner, and where you can be so playful and youthful and fun, and others where you can be so serious and in this whole other headspace. And that's really what your jewelry expresses. It's this extreme elegance and material intricacy, and the best materials. You only use 18 karat gold, but at the same time, you're literally wearing a bicycle chain around your neck, a stylo bic pen from school, a pencil, a chewed pencil, and 3 Crayola crayons made with 18 karat gold. And that's this category that I like to call playful luxury, which is kind of who you are as a person. So
it's definitely a juxtaposition.
Yeah. Is that what you were intending to kind of express your identity in your product, or was that just an outcome of your work?
I think for me, the North Star, I mean, again, starting a brand at the time was like unheard of and not necessarily applauded in my family. Like, you didn't go to Stanford to do a jewelry, like that was kind of the dialogue. So it really took self-reflection. And I guess in that, what I had learned from Hermès was, at the end of the day, they were very true to their DNA. And for me, what I wanted to accomplish is express myself through my jewelry at a time where jewelry was very conventional and very fragmented. And for me, there's like this playful element and this nostalgia that I really like, because it reminds us of our inner child. And so I try to play with that, but I glamorize it and augment it, these everyday objects or these things we come across, through the craft. But at the time, like, people were like, no one's going to pay, for that in jewelry, which was a decision I think I made. And one thing that's really important is that obviously I represent the brand, which was a decision that was not an easy decision, but it's under my name, my story, my everything. But that journey is being reflected in the pieces that I wear or that I make. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like like you're saying, it's all memories, it's experiences, it's, and I have the same thing. That's what drives every collection. It's kind of a continuation of my journey. And what's even more special is then people can ascribe their own meaning to these pieces, but these pieces are meant to remind them of their inner child. And that inner child is this like pure, curious, kind element that's very human and that connects us. And that's kind of like what drives me, I would say.
I love that inner child thought. And I think it really is so clearly expressed in the jewelry you make, and also the way you hold yourself, because you have this amazing contrast. And I think so much of the beauty of life and the things we love are these extreme contrasts and contradictions, like from food, like, you know, warm rice, cold fish, and sushi, warm cake, cold ice cream. And with...
Are you hungry?
I'm kind of hungry. I mean, I feel like all we've done together is eat the past 2 days. But it's I love the I love the contrast of what you do, and the collaborations you've done are actually so extreme on the contrast side of things, which is it's very rare for collaborations in particular, because I think most brands who collaborate try to maximize excellence. Like, I do my best brand A and you do your best brand B, and we come together to create something we can't create alone, right? But as a jewelry business, if you told me, okay, Nadine, the jeweler, is going to collaborate, I would assume maybe with someone who focuses on timepieces. But instead, your first collaboration was McDonald's on the Bling Mac for one of your iconic pieces, the burger ring. Can you please tell us more about that?
Yeah, I think, you know, you and I have spoken about this a bit before, which was, you know, now I think collaborations are definitely at the forefront of a lot of brands and players. And at the time that I started 10 years ago, it wasn't necessarily expected. But that, for me, the driver is creativity. And sometimes there are these like genuine dynamics that you build with someone, and it brings you together. So the first big collaboration I would say I did was with McDonald's, and no one would have expected fast food and fine jewelry. And some people, their perception was don't work with McDonald's because that might dilute people's perception of your brand at this price point. But for me, what I liked was the paradox, was the unexpected element of it. And also McDonald's is a household name. Everyone knows it. And it reminded me of the time I would go as a kid and get a Happy Meal. So there was like a story around it. And it was a great experience. And that relationship happened because they reached out to me. But today, for example, I'm working with Crayola, and Crayola is like every kid gets to play. I mean, we were coloring with Crayola at the Beverly Hills Hotel the other day. Like, it's just it brings out this inner child, just even seeing it, playing with it, coloring with it. And that's the experience or the feeling that I want to bring up in people. And naturally, some of these really natural relationships are built with these brands, which is a really cool experience.
I love that. I mean, I think that being in touch with your youthful side is a luxury, right? It takes time and resources to have the freedom to be able to, as an adult, play around like a child, right? And I think that's why your brand resonates so well with a lot of people who have achieved tremendous success. A lot of people who have achieved tremendous success like to portray that image, and others like to actually portray a completely different image. And I think some of your customers, public facing, are, that I've seen online, like Justin Bieber, Beyonce. Please help me list a few more.
Drake, Karl Lagerfeld,
Lil Yachty.
Lil Yachty.
I mean, that's no joke. Does that shock you or excite you, or has that always been a part of your plan? How does that make you feel?
100%. I am like super flattered by it even today. I think, I mean, let's go back. When you go off the beaten trail and take a risk in life, you have no idea where something's going to land. And I always remember the version of me 10 years ago that wrote down a business plan, or like the things that I would strive to attain through the business, you know? And I don't like, these celebrities weren't even part of where I would try to land the brand. I'm still a one-woman show. So no press team, no, you know, so it kind of naturally happened. And I'm very, very, very lucky. And I feel very blessed with these relationships. But I mean, I'm still very humbled by them, you know? And so you can aspire towards things, but you never know how it's gonna turn out. I mean, people say that I'm very creative and I'm very, you know, but I'm also very lucky. I came at a time where I could portray my brand. I came at a time where people are willing to wear something that's a little outside of the box, you know, wear a piece that starts a dialogue, take that risk. Because when I first started, there was kind of like a starter pack. You know, you joke around about kind of like different starter packs, what people wear and whatever. It was like Van Cleef, Cartier. There was the classics, you know, and there wasn't that much room for a new brand to kind of enter the wrist market. And now it's a little bit different, and I'm very lucky that that's worked to my advantage. But like this industry has a lot of challenges. And I always say, like, you've never really made it. You're constantly going to be faced with different challenges. And one challenge today in the industry is really the gold prices are insanely high. A lot of the manufacturing are being bought out by big brands. So that's leaving very little room for young brands to come in and like manufacture, especially when you're not playing with volumes. So there's, you know, I'm always learning, which is amazing. And you have to think on your feet.
I love that you talked about the right time, right place thing about this moment that we live in. And I feel the exact same way. Like if I was born 10 years earlier, there's no way I'd be sitting here right now and frowning with all these videos for a living. You know what I mean? It's just I was born into an era where there's value in these comedic videos and it could spread. And in a similar way, there's a lot of value from social media that has helped scale what you do.
But you've done a great job doing it. You've done a great job like building, you know, your followers. No, but but at the same time, you're open to adapting and changing as long as it's aligned with you. I think a lot of people lose sight of having that alignment, which is why they disappear or they follow a trend. And I think that kind of understanding yourself is super key.
For sure. I mean, I wanted to actually go a bit deeper on the right time and moment, because maybe the right time for our businesses ended up being the wrong time for the development of our lives. And the reason I say that is because I think jewelry, historically, at least from my experience, like my mom's friends growing up were like, oh, I started a jewelry business, always seemed like a sort of hobby job. You know, it seemed like this more laid back thing where they worked a couple hours a day, but they also chilled with their friends and was like a chill job. And I'm a founder of a jewelry business today, and it's very different. And my entire team is women. I'm surrounded by women on the team, and it's extremely different for all of us. And they say like, this is not what we expected. And we're competing with a lot more people. We're competing with a global audience, and the amount of hours you have to put into a new business today to make it work is different to what it once was. And I see that taking a toll on your social life as a friend, because you are all over the world at once. You are working 24/7. You have 0 employees, which I find insane. You've built all this completely on your own. And you're just always switched on. Whereas 10 years ago, maybe you wouldn't have needed to be or been able to be. So I'd love to know more about you, how you feel about the position that you've become successful in.
No, I think one thing you've touched upon, which I think a lot of people don't understand, is, you know, I'm so grateful for the brand that I have and my career and the life experience that I have, but there's the costs to that, right? And there's, you know, it's not all the glam that you see on Instagram. There's so much work behind it, whether it's emails, logistics, payments, issues, you know, dealing with celebrities, travel, delays, you know, a lot of break-ins, you know, whatever it is, there's challenges that go with it. And
briefly, with no names, can you tell our viewers why you came to LA, for how long, and where from? No names.
I came to meet a client who's a celebrity client who I made pieces custom for. So I'll just leave it at that. But like, again, that's so new for me. And how do you navigate that space? Yes, I flew from Hong Kong. If you open the door, I will take every opportunity, you know, to build a real human relationship and to be inspired and to get to know someone. Because I think jewelry is very emotional. But I mean, and I was stuck with you. I hung out with you way more, but that's, you know, let's not go there. You know, sometimes you aim for the stars and then you just end up on the hill. But
the Beverly Hill.
The Beverly Hill.
Is where we ended up at your hotel.
Exactly. But I think the point that I'm trying to make is that a lot of people are like, oh my God, you have such a cool, and I'm like, yes, I do. But there's also a lot of work that comes about with that. And I think we're in a generation where people don't want to go the extra mile to like make things happen and think that everything just falls in their lap, and it doesn't. I think you have to effort and you have to put yourself outside of your comfort zone, and it comes at a cost. And like for me personally, that cost is I'm 35 years old. what I thought my life would be is at 35, I would have 2 kids, a husband, you know, live in a house, have a dog. I didn't think I would be on planes every 3 days, meeting celebrity. Like, that's not the life that I had envisioned. And I'm not sure that's the way I would define success. For me, success is actually a balance of career and the family component. And I'm not very happy with where I am on an emotional level in the family realm, because I feel like I kind of missed the boat when I see my friends who have their 2nd child, their 3rd child, and like I'm there on a plane going to an art, you know, event. And I think it's important to highlight that, because there is an opportunity cost to the decisions you make. And I take full accountability for mine, but at the same time, I want to move in a direction where I can continue to build a business while still take care of myself as a female, whether it's freezing my eggs and stuff like that, to secure that lifestyle and that family that I want to establish.
Thank you for sharing that.
No problem.
Are there moments where you've considered actually parking this and going all in on that life?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's something I think about very often, because I think that I love my craft and I love the creativity and I love the financial freedom. What actually brings me joy is spending time with people, having real connections, relationships, having a routine. Like, I really value these very simple things that other people might take for granted. And I want to weave more of that into my lifestyle. And one of the reasons why, I mean, I feel I grew up in a household where, you know, I was encouraged as a woman to be independent. And I'm very lucky for that. I'm very privileged, because that mindset has helped me build, you know, what I built and continue doing what I'm doing. But at the same time, there's still a part of me that wants to build a family and all those things. And it's like the clock is ticking, you know?
You look great. I think that we're both active on social media, attending all these events, and it looks very glamorous, and it is very glamorous. And I know that you share the gratitude that I feel. And a lot of the audience is often asking about the behind the scenes. And aside from the lunch we post and the event we post, what's going on in between? And for anyone who lives a similar life, they understand there's actually a lot of alone time. Mm-hmm. Alone time that I'm grateful for, and that is a choice, but nevertheless, alone time. How do you navigate those moments, and how do you feel about all of that in between?
Yeah, I think loneliness is a big thing. And I think that being an entrepreneur requires you to get comfortable with yourself and with being alone. And I don't think that most people are prepared for that. I definitely wasn't. I grew up in a family with a bunch of siblings. I went to school where people were always around. So it was a bit weird to shift, and it's a challenge. I mean, like, again, I told you 2 days ago, I was eating alone with my notebook, spending time with myself. And I've gotten so comfortable over the years spending that time alone, because I've gotten to know myself better. But I always say, to be a good entrepreneur or leader, you have to really be in tune with yourself. And like, growth in a career, like, also requires personal growth. And I have a coach, I have a therapist, I have, you know, traumas that I've gone through that I want to make sure that I address, so that I can be a good leader, so that I can be patient, you know? And I think that those things are also very important. And I see that being integrated more into my job. Like, talk about loneliness. Like, I mean, going to meet a celebrity, or like, people are so different. You're not really prepared. And like, for me, I don't have someone to talk to about it, right? Even from a personal perspective or from a work perspective, I don't have a teammate coming in or get, like, it's a lot of forcing myself to be outside of my comfort zone, and like getting used to it. And I'm constantly challenged outside of my comfort zone. We talked about this. Most people probably think we're extroverted, but I'm actually quite introverted. Someone stops me on the street, I get like, it's not that I'm being rude, and apparently I have a resting bitch face, but like, I'm just not used to, because I'm in my own world a bit. Mm-hmm. And trying to bridge who I am and make sure that's communicated in my interactions. If I'm jet lagged, if I'm feeling low, if I'm, you know, these are all things that you have to constantly address, and it's real.
For sure. I mean, you talk about not having that person to share moments with. In a personal way, not having that person, of course, is partially circumstantial, partially choice. You're looking to find that person. But in your business life, that's purely a choice. And I've had that conversation with you. So you have those moments alone that you go through alone, that you actually seem to like to navigate that way and not have colleagues around when you do those things.
I mean, I think everything is a choice, right? There's the positives and the negatives. The positive is that I can be extremely flexible. I can take full accountability.
Yeah.
I can push. Like I can be on any time zone, etc. The negative is you don't have that support system. You don't have this ability to delegate. You know, you kind of create this team environment. I would say now the closest people to my team are my manufacturers, because we're working on things that are different and new and challenging, like the manufacturing capabilities together, and that creates dialogue. But from a decisions basis, like I don't have someone being like, girl, you just got on a plane 2 days ago for 14 hours. You shouldn't get on this plane to go there because I'm not sure that makes sense for you, you know, because my default is to really, you know, go for every opportunity. And I'm not, it kind of comes at the detriment at times of, you know, my health. And you know, for some people, it could be their mental health. But I think for me, I really create a structure so that I don't fluctuate. And I have people who check in with me with regards to that.
For sure. I mean, if I may, I think that what you've done is tremendous. And what you continue to do alone is incredible. But it reminds me of something my mom told me growing up. And she still says it to me. She says, be careful how long you're single for. Because the moment you get used to being on your own and making decisions on your own, it only gets more and more difficult to share decisions. And we've seen that, you know, our friends who are single for a long time and they enjoy it, and then they get into a relationship, they're not used to sharing their space and sharing moments and sharing decisions and compromising. And the same thing happens in a work environment.
Yeah.
I know that from my side. I only started growing my team a year or two ago. I've been doing this for 6 years. It's really hard to get constructive, useful feedback at first when there's so much pride and so much soul in everything you've done and built with your own hands.
But you've also had to protect what you've done. You
Exactly.
had to like, you have to. And so you become very, I would say, strong and like steadfast, but that's not necessarily a healthy thing.
I mean, it's brought you to where you are today. But I do find that when I started to let go just a bit more and let colleagues in that knew what they were doing, I was able to focus at least 10, 20, 30% more on myself and myself outside of work. This is all about work, by the way. This wasn't about your dating life. It's none of my business. But I know you have a big desire to focus on your health more and your mental health and your physical health. And it sounds like that may be difficult to do when you are full-time, the only person doing your job.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think we're in a generation where more and more women have careers, are like striving for something different. I mean, even from a jewelry perspective, like there used to be a lot, like jewelry used to be something purchased by men for their wives. Now the wife has like the power to go and choose what she wears. And that tends to be the client that comes towards me. You know, like there's been a shift in the way that we are empowered, I would say, in this generation. But at the same time, it comes at a cost. And, you know, I think that a lot of people talk about their success, but they don't talk about the difficult decisions they had to make or their regrets. And one thing I don't want to do is in 10 years be, you know, I don't know, top brand, whatever, every magazine, celebrities, etc., but like actually not have a family for myself or have built an intimate relationship with a partner, because building is very important to me. And I built a brand that I'm obsessed with, and I built like from a creative perspective, but I also want to build in my personal life. I want to build a partnership. I want to teach my kids things that, you know, I wasn't necessarily taught. I want to deal with things that probably I would like to redo in my life or like my childhood and teach them. And I think that probably a lot of the things that I wasn't able to do in my childhood are manifesting creatively in my brand. And that's probably where that connection comes from. It's very healing for me to play because there wasn't so much play. I was born in a family where we were traveling a lot. We were very tight as a unit, but at one point, divorce happened. There was an explosion of that unit. I had to adapt. And so there's like this survival mode that's deeply ingrained in me that I want to kind of like hone in on, address, and, work on.
I mean, I'll be honest. Whenever I see you, you seem so incredibly put together and presentable. And honestly, and this is me leading up to asking you out. But no, this is honestly, and I think everyone that meets you thinks, wow, this woman has her shit together. And it's inspiring, and it's incredible that you're opening up about what actually is happening behind those doors, where you're actually struggling. And if you don't mind me asking, could you share some of those moments?
Yeah, of course. I'm happy to share some of those moments. It's interesting because, I want to transmit a lot, but I'm not sure like even how to articulate it. I think I come off as super
Alpha.
Yeah, alpha. I mean, I think my masculine side had to come out during the fact that you're building a brand. And so you go into survival mode, you stand your ground, you assert yourself, etc. And that's become part of my identity through my job. But I'm very playful. I'm very sensitive, actually. And it's funny because I think that I'm losing that sense of sensitivity as I continue down this path, because to survive, I've had to create some sort of walls, And even my therapist said that. She's like, you're talking to me about actually quite a few traumatic things that have happened to you. Like most people would struggle, but you're not crying. You're extremely articulate. You told me how you like moved past it in a way you don't allow yourself to have these moments of like hardship. And I think it's important that whoever is successful or whoever has a platform to discuss says that there are moments in your life you have no clue what you're doing. There are moments in your life where you're really on your knees. You have no idea how things are going to happen. And I remember one of those moments where like my life completely tipped over was, I have a very strong relationship with my father. He was very patriarchal in my family. And then from one day to the next, my life completely shifted and I had to reorganize everything. And it was a very intense moment in my life. And at the same time that this was happening, I was running a brand of fine jewelry, and fine jewelry isn't a necessity. It's an emotion. It's like pretty frivolous. But I was challenged with like dealing with this very strong personal hardship of seeing someone you care about in a situation and not being able to help them, feeling very helpless while continuing to build my brand. And that was one moment that I struggled very deeply. But through that experience, people talk about post-traumatic stress. I had post-traumatic growth. It motivated me, it drove me, and I realized how lucky I am to have a platform and to have had editors still support me, clients still support me, and people celebrate me for my craft independently. And, but that was a very, very difficult time in my life. And at one point, I just didn't want to have my name out there. I didn't want to be exposed. I mean, having a brand, you're basically extremely vulnerable. You're allowing people to have an opinion. You're allowing people to come into your life. Like me talking to you about the fact that, I'm so happy with where I am in my career, but I'm not necessarily as happy with where I am in my personal life. And I'm trying to make changes in that. That exposes me in some way. I could come here and, elude this perfect life, but it's not the case. And I think it's important that we should all express that, and connect on a human level with regards to that. And so that was a huge challenge in my life. I had a breakup at that time. I had someone break into my house. That sense of safety completely imploded. And so I've spent the past 7 years creating that sense of safety for myself. But in doing that, I've lost a lot of that sensitivity, to people because I'm in survival mode. And what I'm trying to address this year is move out of survival mode, move into compassion, understand not everyone gets up as fast, and have that ability to empower people in a positive way.
Talk about that horrible moment that happened to you, and then coming out having the, not PTSD, but you said the terrible moment happened and then you had PT growth, right? the in-between of that and everything that happened in between, I assume was not just a consequence, something that happened to you, but actually something that you chose to work on. How did that look day to day?
I mean, journaling, committing to self-care, listening to myself. I think all of these things are really important and very key into moving through this, but also like finding a group of people who are my support system. I'm extremely close to my siblings and I'm extremely close to my friends, and they're a strong foundation that inspires me and that also motivates me. And I think it's important that people have communities that they can kind of rely on in difficult times. And so, you know, sometimes when people interview me and ask me like, what are the challenges you have in entrepreneurship? I always tell people, I was like, it's really, you have to find a community. You have to have people. You need to be anchored somewhere, or else it becomes too difficult to go through the ebbs and flows. And like, you know, again, back to the loneliness, I think that life and work at the same time force you to get comfortable with yourself and to like face fears and challenges. And it's really important to address those things and understand that some days are easier than others. You know, like I spend a lot of time alone on a plane and I have to sit with myself, and thank God I don't really give a fuck what someone thinks about me. I don't, you know, I create my brand. I try to stay humble, but know my worth. Like these are all things that I'm facing and challenging. And I think that comes from the fact that I actually sit with myself and I'm open to feedback and I'm open to having conversations.
I mean, it sounds like even though your goals are slightly delayed from what you would have liked for them to be in your personal life, you are gaining all the skills to actually navigate those things a lot better once you reach them.
Absolutely. And appreciate them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing. I feel very grateful for the life I live. I wouldn't, you know, I've again been forced to have quite challenging situations, but it has developed me and it's part of my story. And I'm very comfortable with who I am. And I find my story quite different and unique. Mm-hmm. And like, instead of shying away from that, I lean into it. Mm-hmm. And I share it.
Sure. I mean, I find that being grateful is not a feeling, but actually something you practice.
Yeah.
And it's actually taking that moment, like on those flights, and thinking, okay, I'm alone on this flight and I'm not doing what I thought I'd be doing right now, and shifting that into a grateful approach of, wow, I'm on this flight.
Exactly.
And I'm going to this place.
Exactly. I get this experience. Like, who thought I would be in the same room as this person and they would be asking for me? Like, exactly. You know, and that's my approach. And like you said, it's a muscle that you work on. And I remember my code to my Gmail account in 2014, and I don't remember anything. Like, I changed my passcode yesterday and I can't get into my Uber app. Like, but what I remember is it was positive 2015. It was like this concept of like shifting my focus to what's positive in my life and like leveraging that moving forward. And I really, really believe that. Like, listen, there's a lot of kumbaya stuff out there about like self-help, positive energy, like all this stuff. I don't think I'm like that lost in that. But I do think that there are some elements there that resonate with me, which is you can look at your life and look at all the everything that's going wrong. Or you can look at your life and say, wow, look how life showed me this path moving forward. Mm-hmm. So there are more surprises in store. As long as I show up and am the best version of myself, I believe good things will come my way. And honestly, in my career, so much of it was serendipitous, but it was also, I put myself out there. I went off the beaten path. You know, even when I just had this like faith that things would work out. And I'm now using that approach in my personal life as well.
You talk about putting yourself out there and getting on these planes and meeting these people. And you also touched on being an introvert. How do you navigate those situations as an introvert, and how do you recover from them as well?
I mean, that's something that's like, again, being an introvert and having to be extroverted is outside of my comfort zone, but it's a learned skill. And one thing that I've done in spending more time with myself and understanding myself better and not focusing my energy either on my job or on another person is understanding how I restore. And I love hikes. I love nature. I love calmness. I love, sound of birds. Like I love these kind of things. And so I've found moments or live in places where that's kind of the lifestyle I have that's very different. That's a juxtaposition from, I would say, my career and the excitement and the energy and everything in order to balance things out. And I think everyone needs to find out what that is for them. For some people, it's photography, listening to music, cooking, whatever it is. Like for me, it's Pilates. This morning, I went to Pilates in the morning with a friend, like, going for a walk. I usually do almost 20,000 steps a day.
Wow.
If I have a routine, if I'm lucky to have a routine and be in control of my schedule, I walk 20,000 steps a day because I find it very therapeutic and I can function on it. I can send emails now with our phone. We can do all these things. And like, these are little things that I've baked into my day-to-day life that enable me to be a happier, more present human.
And outside of those moments where you can actually budget time to recharge, like on a hike or in a Pilates class, do you have ways of managing being an introvert during the moment where you actually pushed outside of your comfort zone at some of the events that we find ourselves at together, for example?
Well, first, it's like building real relationships with people who are at the event. So then I feel like nourished by real friendships and real conversation. Like I'm not a small talker. The worst thing for me is to be small talking. That's just not my vibe. I'm usually the first person to exit a party. Like it's just, that's the way I am. But moments of connection really energize me. And it's like finding those moments of connection with people is key. So like as an example, I flew from Hong Kong. I'm currently in LA. I'm going through New York, and then I'm ending up at my house in Zurich. When I go to New York, I'm seeing both of my siblings. When I get to Zurich, I have two of my best friends flying in for the weekend. So it's like these people are key to like that happiness and those moments. Yeah. And that energizes me.
I love that. I mean, I love what you're saying about doubling down on that social moment that you find uncomfortable by being more social. Like to manage being an introvert, basically you're building a relationship with someone instead of actually taking a step back.
Totally.
Which is the natural thing to do.
Exactly. Leaning into it. And I think, but also getting I care for real relationships. And I think you can find those wherever, in whatever room you are. You just need to be willing to be vulnerable. Right. And I think you and I have been in so many rooms together, and it's only recently that we've connected because there was shared vulnerability, because there was shared honesty, and I think that's important. And
Sure.
And I also think you learn so much from other people. We all have a different life experience. And so being open to that,
100%. I'd love to talk more about those relationships that you have to make and do make as a part of your job. We both find ourselves in an environment where we're around people that have achieved tremendous success or have tremendous access to wealth. And those people often have equally tremendous egos. And I mean, I built my whole career poking fun at a lot of those people. And I try to minimize my time around them, especially when they're drinking, because that's when ego plus alcohol is a disaster, right? And I'm sure that with you selling jewelry at the price point that you sell it, you must meet people that you wouldn't want to see when you're off the clock working.
Honestly, I'm very lucky because I have amazing clients. I've really had great experiences. I don't have that same, but like when you're seeing people who are drunk and with egos, I'm already in bed, like I've already exited the party.
Good.
I think it's more about like my experiences, but I don't put myself, I would say, in like the nightclub party scene as much. But for me, the ego thing, maybe I'm not attuned to it. I don't know. Maybe it's
Good.
A man thing, a female. I don't know.
No.
But
it could be actually you make people comfortable and not have to try
like
to
flex.
show off.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think with me, because of my fictional characters.
Why are you a fictional character? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure.
Because this is outside of your comfort zone, being fully in character, right?
Yeah. Right now, being myself?
Yeah.
I mean, it's actually easier than being in character. I'm just myself. But why am I in character?
Why did it take you so long to be yourself?
I like to give people what they ask for versus what I think they might want. And I think that with my first video that I filmed, I had no intention of posting it online. I had sent it to a friend by WhatsApp, and it spread on its own, and people were requesting more through like love and support, like, please make more videos. So I gave them what they wanted. But I didn't want to just assume that all aspects of my life would be interesting, and that kind of snowballed. At the same time, I had a job at Apple. Apple's a very secretive company. So secrecy just became a part of my thing. And privacy is great, to be honest. I also really value the private life. So there's like a positive externality from it as well.
Yeah.
And I don't think you gain anything by overexposing. And I'm actually very happy and grateful that I've been able to offload my public exposure to my characters and not to myself. Because if someone comments or says, that character sucks, I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's a character. You don't take it personally. I don't take it personally. But if someone makes a comment at me personally, I could take it a different way. Mm-hmm. So it's a nice way to hedge
but I think
exposure.
But I'm curious to see how you're going to experience this.
The podcast?
Yeah, and too. The feedback and you know what people say, because you know I think it takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there and to be willing to expose yourself.
Thank you.
And
I agree. You're here.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, both of us are here, and I'm sure everyone you're interviewing is the same thing. But one thing I was going to say with privacy, because I mean, we've talked a lot about what luxury is, because luxury is shifting, it's experiences, it's all this stuff. I do think that freedom is one thing, but also privacy is another. Like, I don't envy celebrities who aren't able to go and have those peaceful, simple moments.
For sure. Because,
you know, there's an influx of photos, there's an influx of people, there's an influx of intrigue. And so I think that privacy is very key. And that's something I also try to adapt in my life, despite trying to also share what I can on social. And I think finding the balance of that is very difficult.
It's very difficult, for sure. However, I do think that people who are successful for a long time rarely made one decision that got them there. They usually make hundreds, if not thousands, of decisions on a daily basis that lead them to where they are. And year one, I had 5,000 followers. Year two, I had 10,000. Year three, let's say 50, whatever it was. I could have walked away at any point. And I chose to double down every time because the trade-off made sense. I wasn't a victim of growing popularity. It was my strategy, because I knew that, okay, more followers means more viewers for the advertising I could do for someone else's business or my own, which means I can get closer to the life of my dreams. I'm willing to make that trade-off. And I think that most people are making conscious decisions of where they're headed, although sometimes it goes far beyond someone's expectations and they grow further than they would have expected, and that's where they can't control what happens anymore. So I guess this goes back to growing slowly and that desire to be the biggest and the best, which is very modern, but sometimes toxic as well. It's like this like capital greed, like at any cost. Let's grow the business at any cost. And when it comes to social media, growing at any cost is the cost of your personal life and cost of your privacy. With factories, it's the environment. And, you know, there's always a cost for anything you do. So I think that the choices you've made are actually great, because you could have put more at risk and put more of your private life at risk. And you've chosen not to. So,
but I would say, I mean, you've talked about something, you know, that we've discussed a lot of. My strategy from a marketing perspective is very different than most fine jewelers. I don't believe in influencers. I don't believe in like paying for press. I believe that if you have something that's a strong enough product, then slowly but surely you'll get to where you should be. And that's kind of my approach. And I've gotten a lot of feedback with regards to that. People, you know, suggest to strategize differently. I don't have any retailers, although most people do have retailers, and they suggest like being in retailers to be a real brand, you know, like there's all these different approaches. But I think that this word of mouth, slow, steady, in your lane, decision making is very key. And I think we're in such a fast-paced environment that like sometimes you can get pressured into going a different route, which you have to be steadfast in your vision to not be influenced by that.
For sure. Would you do it the same way if you could do it all over again?
Yeah, I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, I want to adapt, but I have a very clear vision of where I want to go. And I want to make pieces that are aspirational, that people want, that people come to for, pushing the boundary or doing something creative and innovative. And as I told you before, like my key driver isn't a financial thing. It's a creative thing. It's expression. It's pushing the envelope. It's expanding, and not everyone agrees with that, but that is my version of success and pride in what I do.
I think a lot of young people, and particularly young women, are inspired by everything you've done, everything that you do. Even just women around me and people around me, they love your product. They love the life you lead, and they're very inspired by it. Would you happen to have a message for people who might be scared to take the steps you've taken as a founder, as a jewelry designer, but also as someone who literally seeks discomfort for the sake of growth?
I will address that. Although I have to say, like, I don't have everything answered. I don't have all my questions. I wouldn't say I'm always adapting to situations, but the advice I would say to anyone is, first of all, entrepreneurship is not for everyone. Like, I think the first thing people need to do is define their version of success, because I find that a lot of people go in a direction that's not even the direction they're trying to go and get lost in that direction and then hit a wall and have to re-identify themselves, right? And I think for me, yes, you're going to learn in that process, but why don't you just take a moment with yourself and try to understand, ignore all the outside influences and be like, who am I and what do I want to do? Like, do I want kids? Do I want to be a career woman? Do I want, like, what brings me joy? And also what makes me unique? And I think, I was bullied growing up, and I actually think that was probably one of the best things that happened to me, because it helped me understand that I was different and use that to my benefit, right? Which is, I came into an industry that was not at all the way. I didn't go to art school. Like, I didn't do what most people did to get there, but that gave me a different perspective, and that gave me a point of view. The fact that I traveled all around the world and grew up, I always say I fit in everywhere, but I belong nowhere. I moved every 4 years of my life almost. And this whole sense of not fitting in was actually my superpower, because it made me very adaptable to different situations. And like, some people, it's going to be the opposite. They grew up in the same place. They grew up and maybe there's something very powerful and there's some strength in that. Just like someone who's traveled, I think it's understanding what success looks like, defining that clearly, listening to yourself, and understanding what you want. And like you said, every day moving towards achieving that. And then also asking, what makes you unique? What are the things that you love to do? I see some people who are obsessed with one thing, but they choose to make that a passion and not necessarily their job. But sometimes I'm like, there's an opportunity in that space. Like, if you really love what you're doing, there's probably somewhere you can merge your passion and, make it your career. And I find that the most successful people are people who absolutely love what they do and believe in what they do. And for me, I love what I do. I believe in what I do. I am inspired by the people I come across. But most importantly, it's the human part that I love, which is, jewelry is like a moment keeper. It reminds you of a person, an experience, a chapter in your life. And being able to touch everyone's kind of story and customizing and having that one-on-one interaction with my client makes me feel that in my own way, there's that like human connection. And that, I think, is very, very powerful.
Beautiful. In the very Gstaad Guy fashion, I would love to play a quick game of à la Poubelle versus Fantastique.
Okay, so à la Poubelle for me is small talk, mean girls, all of this like toxic behavior, cigarettes.
Okay.
Cigarettes.
Okay, nice.
And Fantastique is just openness, kindness, and connection.
Love it. Fantastic. Or Fantastique. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm very excited to see all the things you want come true for you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Gstaad Guy podcast. If you're keen to learn more, please follow along by engaging with our social channels on Instagram, TikTok, Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. And we look forward to seeing you next week. Merci beaucoup, à la prochaine, and a big hug from the Gstaad Guy.